can't remember if I have ever preached 2 Isaiah passages in 2 weeks in a row, but that's what's happening today. Just the lectionary reading is such. So it's Isaiah chapter 11. A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear, but with the righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The wolf shall live with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the lion and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand in the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So I don't know if you noticed this in this passage, but there was a section there of all these animals that are laying down together or doing activities together that are uncommon animals to be together. Now, in our minds, in our corporate minds, in the way that most people think of this passage, is typically that the lion will lay down with the lamb. And I got kind of tripped up because I almost said it myself when I was reading it. But it's nowhere in the Bible does that phrase happen, the lion lying down with the lamb. It has the wolf lying down and all these other critters lying down together, but never the lion lying down with the lamb. So it's one of those strange things, how that came into our consciousness. If you look up on the web, the lion lying down with the lamb, will have lots of entries. It will mean it's not actually in the Bible, but it is in our consciousness here at Christmas. It's often an image of Christmas. But it comes from this passage where unusual friendships have been formed, unlikely friendships. Now, that's another thing if you were to look up, and maybe you have spotted some of those videos online of unlikely friends. They're very heartwarming. They're very touching. And if you're an animal lover, it will just touch you to the core. But it's really, really popular right now to have these unlikely friends get attention. In fact, there's a book series called Unlikely Friends. And each book is a selection of how these two unlikely friends came to meet, how they were friends, and then how their friendship bloomed over time. And this series highlights unusual friends like this, like a giraffe and an ostrich. Yeah, that's one of the examples. A cat and an owl. Yeah, that's really, really strange. A dog and a duck. Like there's a whole lot of them about dogs. They're just so friendly that they can befriend a lot of different animals, but a dog and a duck is really unusual. Dog and a cheetah is really unusual. A rabbit and a deer was photographed in the woods, just being friends in the woods. They were following each other, and yeah, really sweet. A chimpanzee and tiger. In the ocean, a grouper and a moray eel. A snake and a hamster. That's really unusual. Yeah, that's incredibly strange, isn't it? A lion and an antelope. Very, very strange. So this passage that we have today, we actually have glimpses of it in our world today. of these unusual, unlikely relationships, friendships even, forming. Now, what's common across most of these stories is that somehow they became friends or they met at a crucial time in their life. One of them was typically one of the predators met maybe when they were a baby, when that predator instinct was lower. At some unusual time, maybe there was a stress. There's stories of animals that are in captivity and in stressful situation, and they're forced to be in quarters that they normally would not be. And somehow that strange situation creates a bond, or that meeting at an unusual time in life creates a bond. One of the most unusual ones that I found was of Milo the Dachshund, little Dachshund dog, and he was friended by a lion. The lion was found as a cub, had some injury of some kind, and they put it in a cage with this little dog, and the little dog just began mothering it, and as the lion just grew so big, they continued to be the best of friends and were lifelong friends. Now, this is a dog of 11 pounds and a lion of 500 pounds becoming best friends. Yeah. And, of course, there's been a documentary on the tortoise and the hippo being friends, and that one's really famous, and that was in Kenya. I read that book to my kids. There's a book on it. I read that to my kids forever, how this turtle, this big turtle, babysat this baby hippo, and then the hippo grew up with the friendship of the turtle. So these are common enough now in our world that people are really starting to recognize and appreciate these stories. So it's kind of strange that we would read that here at Advent and think of it as some future thing when actually it can be in our life right now. Now, one of the explanations for what happens is imprinting. The children, baby animals, there's that period when they're young that it's called imprinting, when they're open to bonding in a way that they wouldn't be open later. And that's called imprinting. They imprint the image of that unusual, it usually is their parent, but that unusual creature can allow a relationship that wouldn't normally happen, that is actually counter to their instinct. So my question today is, how can we get past some of our instinct and allow for these unlikely relationships to be more prevalent? It is Advent. This is the passage for the day, so there must be something really about this image that can be life-giving to us. Advent is our time when we are anticipating the coming of the Christ child, but all the passages around Advent that have been given to us from the lectionary, they're guidelines for us to open up to and learn from that will help us make Christmas an even more significant experience for our life. So how can a sense of openness that surpasses our instinct bring Advent? So I ask that question knowing that our country is in a great deal of political difference. So how can a sense of openness allow us to have unlikely relationships? So when you put it in that setting, suddenly, a lamb lying down with a sheep seems like just the kind of message that we need to hear in our world today. So when you put it in a political environment where we're so ripped apart and so diverse and so divided, than to hear a message of unlikely relationships. Can you see the hope? Can you see the light that comes into that moment? I think this is a really important passage for this year's Advent. So the question is, I don't know if you have this in your life, but I know I do in mine. I have people in my life that do not see politically the same way I do. Surprising, maybe that is your experience as well. So how do we foster these unlikely connections? How can we reach across those divides and make a closer connection? How can the lion lay down with the lamb? The beauty of the Bible is that there is great wisdom in the Bible. The beginning of this passage has been interpreted as a prophetic image of the coming of Christ. The root of Jesse and all this is really about the Christ child coming. But the very word Christ we often overlook. The very words of Christ says, "But I tell you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who mistrust you and persecute you." So how do we get to this unlikely connection, unlikely relationship, unlikely even friendship across this great divide that we might experience, that might be instinctual even within us to be counter to? We do it by following the very instructions of Jesus. Now, in all honesty, this may be one of the very hardest passages in the entire Bible. And I have read a lot about it this week, and I have heard people of other faiths say this is the most golden verse of the Bible. Love your enemies. It's powerful. And it is the true way to make that connection across our instincts, across our divide. So it's really 1 step, 2 step, 3 step. Love your enemy is the commandment. Bless those who curse you. You say a blessing for those who curse you. You find a way to bless them, not just in word, but in deed as well. A blessing is a gift. You find a way to give to those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. There's not enough good in this world. Do good to those who hate you. And this is the one that is particularly important that I want to point out today. You pray for those who mistreat you and persecute you. Now, I don't know what your prayer life is like, but if you want to be prayer warriors and really see the power of prayer, you do this verse. If you pray for your enemies, you will truly understand what prayer can be. Because prayer is about transforming us. More than it is asking God to change this world. It is about us being different. So by praying for our enemies, we will naturally have these unlikely relationships. Verse 6 in the passage that I have quoted all the animals together that are unusual, it ends with saying that a child shall lead them. A child shall lead all these unlikely relationships, these unlikely friendships will be led by a child. We have our model before us in the Bible, the model of Christ. We know the hard work that's for us in our own lives and in the world to create these unlikely friendships. So every day in Advent, come on in. And every day in Advent, as we're looking to the birth of Christ, we ask that you stay alert, that you wait for the coming of Christ. But I want to ask you to pray for your enemies. I want to ask you, when you're praying for your enemies, to think of that verse that's not in the Bible, but is already planted there, that lamb laying down with the lion, and then pray for your enemy. And I want to tell you that this is urgent for our country. This is necessary for our world. This could be a mighty movement of Christian faith to pray for our enemies. This Advent, that's what I would like for you to do. And as we are about to move to communion, I want to remind you that our communion tradition is also consistent with this. United Methodist Church has no requirements for communion. Now, I was in Spain for a month and a half, and this was really important to me. I could not take communion the whole time I was there. Here I am, a pastor, and I couldn't. This is incredibly important that we make no requirements for communion. So it means that everyone can come, no matter if you don't even call yourself a Christian, you can come to the Lord's table. This is God's table, God's feast. In the same world that this is God's world. So when we say as United Methodists that this table is open, we're saying that this could possibly help you recognize God in a way that the music might not, that the words I say might not, but being handed a loaf, a piece of a bread that we're all partaking in, you might encounter God in a way you have not before. In the same way that praying for your enemies might create some new experience of God for you. So I want to ask you, when you come down for down for communion, I want you to take it in a sense of prayer. I want you to stand in line and do the unlikely thing of praying for your enemy as you're coming for communion. What will this table mean if it truly is set for all the division that we have even in this room? So as you're walking down, be prayerful, be mindful, pray for your enemies. Let this be a different kind of communion today. Let it be a communion where it is all of us in unison together, acting on the very command that Jesus gave us.